All right, we are 1 minute past. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar, The Ultimate Guide to Managing Records Anywhere. We appreciate you joining us today, and the first thing I'd like to do is just take a second to introduce our speakers. My name is Shana Horka, and I work in product marketing here at Gimmal, and I'm joined by our key speaker today, Director of Sales Engineering, Dean Meisenheimer. Before we get started, I have just a couple of housekeeping items to go through. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to submit them in the Q&A section on your screen, and we're going to answer as many as we have time for at the end of the presentation. There will be at least one poll question that you will see pop up, so please keep an eye out for that. And as always, if you have any technical difficulties, please let us know so we can assist you. To kick things off, I have just a couple of slides here to tell you a little bit about Gimmal and how we can help you take control of your information with our suite of solutions. Founded in 2002, Gimmal is a records, information management, and governance software company that helps you balance the value your information provides with the risk it also presents. Whether you're trying to discover information in unstructured data sources, quickly respond to information requests, or comply with policies across multiple repositories, Gimmal can help you achieve your information governance goal. We have a client success team and a global network of partners that deliver solutions in conjunction with our key partners like Microsoft and SAP. Gimmal's family of software products work together to let you create an efficient digital workplace. Our comprehensive solutions include records management, content governance for SharePoint, document management for SAP solutions, Altitude, a file analysis solution, and most recently added Gimmal Migration, which helps you achieve the fastest migrations to Microsoft 365. Gimmal solutions give you a unified view across all systems and manage the full lifecycle of information from a central location. Our solutions put policy on your information where it already exists, so you know that it is retained and disposed of in a compliant manner. Our products often result in large cost savings through optimizing and leveraging infrastructure you may already own, such as Microsoft 365. But without further ado, I'll go ahead and hand it over to Dean so he can get started with today's presentation.
Thank you, Shana. The ultimate guide to records management. I like that word, ultimate. So let's start by just talking a little bit about the problem. In the enterprise today, I don't think it's any secret. In the enterprise, in your personal life, everywhere, there is a tremendous amount of information coming at us. It's estimated when you look at the various analyst firms that the world is going to create and replicate 175 zettabytes of data by 2025. And that's just a number that's hard to kind of roll your head around. 175 zettabytes. To give you a comparison, in 2018, we produced about 22 zettabytes. So you're talking about 8 times as much information in a span of 7 years. And the scary part for records managers is 33% of that information is going to be unstructured data. Or at least, let me rephrase that. A lot of that information is going to be unstructured data, and about a third of that is going to be considered rot, information that's redundant, obsolete, or trivial. And so the things you got to worry about, right, is where's that information going, right? Where are users storing all this information? Is there consistency in how the information is being stored? Is there consistency in my properties and in my metadata? And what kind of risk does this open the organization up to? Does the information fall under privacy acts like GDPR or CCPA or HIPAA or others? Does the information contain trade secrets or PII information, or what's out there? And that's a big challenge and a big concern for records managers, for chief compliance officers, and others. Think about your own organization. Just in your head, kind of think about all the different places you have content that you work with. How many different content sources are there across your network? SharePoint Online with Microsoft 365, Network file shares haven't gone away. Email is still out there. A lot of companies are using tools like Box now, right, as enterprise file storage. Legacy content management systems like FileNet, Documentum, right? How many of those systems are out there, and how many of those systems actually contain records that need to be placed under formal retention and ultimately under disposition? So that takes us to the first poll question. And this is a multi-choice. You can choose all that apply. Where do you have records stored today? Do you have records in SharePoint Online, SharePoint On-Premise, file shares, in Box, Documentum, FileNet? Do you have records in email, either as emails or attachments? Do you have physical records? Do you have other systems, whether that's OpenText Content Server or Laserfish or other systems that are out there, right? There's a variety of different content management systems out there, and your records could be stored across some or all of these. So it's not a single choice. Pick all that might apply to your environment, and we'll kind of see what the breakdown is here in a moment. It's always kind of interesting to see the results from the audience. That's why we like to share them in real time. It's there's been a lot of market consolidation in content management systems over the years, but there's also been a growth in new places to store content. So when you think about, Box exploded on the scene 10 or 15 years ago, there's now Azure Storage, there's Amazon Storage, there are other cloud-based document management systems, right? There's a lot of different systems out there.
And Dean, it looks like attendees are not able to choose more than one option.
Okay. Sorry about that. This was supposed to be multi-select. Pick the biggest option. Pick the one that has the most records then. Let's go that way with it. Sorry about that, folks. And thanks for pointing that out there in the chat panel. We appreciate that. So yeah, there's a lot of new systems that have come online, a lot of file sharing options out there, and that's going to continue to grow, right? So, and it's not exactly a shock. File shares, there's a lot of those out there still. Every company has them, and they're hard to get rid of. And one of the challenges with file shares, just think about your own C drive, or if you use a tool like Box or Dropbox or another one, do you even know what's out there in your My Documents folder? Probably not, right? So that's where Gimmal comes into play, is really to try and help you improve your information governance, to improve the visibility around your information, where information is at, what repository that information in, and then help you mitigate risk. How long should your records be classified? How long should they be retained? Right? Are some of the records vital records or need to be marked as permanent and kept forever? How long should things be kept? And then, start to get increased efficiency by now as a records manager, being able to have a single view of all of your records from one location. Have a web-based dashboard, have a common view of all my records, whether they're in multiple repositories, file shares, or physical records. And then be able to get consistency in how those records are managed, so that as I'm setting up my file plan, as I'm setting up my retention schedule, as I'm creating legal holds, I'm consistently applying that across all of my record sources. I don't have to go configure it in multiple locations. And that's what Gimmal Records Management provides, the ability to take control of your information in every repository with in-place records management. It really gives you, in-place records management gives you a more effective approach to records. Right? In the past, everyone had tried kind of that centralized approach where you had to pull all of the records from all across your enterprise into one central Uber repository, and all the records would have to be managed there and retained there and ultimately disposed of from there. And that was just proven to be unmanageable. It's impossible to get everything into one place like that. And so with in-place records management, it's a bit of a shift. The records are managed where they're at. Your systems are deployed based on your business requirements and your users' need. And then you can right? Whether that's Box or Microsoft 365 and SharePoint or legacy ECM systems that may have been out there for 10 or 15 or 20 years, right? But the systems are deployed based on business need. And then records management is deployed as a web-based application that can either be hosted on-prem in your data center or can be delivered as a SaaS offering, right? So there's no infrastructure to host. And the records management solution is where you as a records manager can configure your file plan, set up your retention schedule, create your legal holds, run your reports, and have a single view of all of your records across the organization, because the content stays in place. The records policy gets actually pushed out onto the records where they're at rest. The records never get moved. The records never get copied, right? Some systems will copy records into Azure storage or into other cloud-based storage, and they're making copies of all of your records. Well, ultimately, you're paying for that storage, right, with the vendor. Gimmal's managing the records in place in the location where the record's at, which means two things. One, content's not flying all over the network. You're not paying for additional storage. And for your users, there's improved user adoption because they can work in the context of the business process. Content is never moved, and ultimately the content gets dispositioned from in place over time, right? This becomes a seamless process for your end user community. So let's take a moment and kind of give you a view of what Gimmal Records Management looks like, and then we'll come back and open it up for some Q&A at the end. So as I go through the demo, if you do have questions, type them in the Q&A panel, and I promise you we'll answer all your questions at the end. So this is Gimmal Records Management. This is what it looks like as a records manager. It's a web-based application that I log into through whatever my browser of choice is. I'm using Edge. You can use Chrome, Firefox, Safari, whatever your personal preference is. But from here, I can see that this instance of Gimmal Records Management is connected to multiple content sources. So I have SharePoint Online, where I'm managing records. I have SharePoint On-Premise, where I'm managing records. I have my network file shares that I'm managing records in. I have a Box repository that I'm managing records in. And I also have physical records, right? So most of our clients still have physical records out there today. Very few people, quite frankly, I'm comfortable saying no one has gone 100% digital at this point. So the connectors that Gimmal Records Management provides allow us to reach into these various content sources, crawl and index the records, and then go through an automated classification process. And I can quickly see how effectively all of my records are classifying. I can see if I have some records that have fallen into the unclassified bucket, and I can see what those records are. I can run reports, and I can make whatever adjustments I need to. If I come in some Monday morning and suddenly this has jumped up and it's taken up a quarter of the pie, I know somebody probably dumped some things out there on the network that we weren't expecting, right? And in the center of the screen, I can see my most commonly used record classes. So here I can see my legal contracts happen to be the most commonly used record class. My personnel files is the second most common, and my property contracts are the third most common, and so forth. So right off the bat, I've got good visibility into where am I managing records, how is my classification running, how are things being classified, and in the center of the screen, I can see at a glance, hey, here are my most recent records that have been brought into the system. Give this a quick refresh here. And I can see these records came in from SharePoint Online. Here's when they were indexed in. Here's the record class that the record was automatically classified into. And because we're managing the records in place, there's actually an active link to where the record is located. Now, if I want to scroll down this screen, I can come down and I can see there's some records that came in from Box a few days back, some additional SharePoint Online records. So I've got kind of visibility into the most recent activity. And if I want to learn more about one of these records, I just click the three dots and that brings up the record details screen. So again, the record's being managed in place. In this example in SharePoint Online, it tells me exactly where that record is sitting. I can see the title of the record. I can see a unique identifier that Gimmal has assigned to the record. Every record gets a unique ID. I can see that this is an electronic record, not a physical record. And then I see the record class that the record has been assigned to. Based on the record classification, I then see the life cycle that the record inherited based on the record class. So since this is a property contract, we're waiting for an end of life event for the facility. And then once that happens, we'll wait for 6 years, and then we'll do an automated dispose and delete. If I want to see more information about the record or take actions on this record, I can click on the pull down. I could reclassify the record. So as a records manager, I may choose to override the automated classification. Well, I have the right to do that. I'm the records manager. Maybe I want to declare the record. And in Gimmal terms, that simply means by declaring it, we're going to trigger locking on the record in its respective repository so it can no longer be changed, no longer be edited. That could happen as part of the record lifecycle as well. Maybe I want to mark this as a vital record or mark it obsolete, or maybe I want to add the record to a legal hold. I can simply select, go to the pull down, choose the appropriate legal hold that's been set up, and assign the record to the legal hold. Right? Or maybe I want to see the audit trail or view the properties. I mentioned we monitor and we crawl the repositories looking for new records or looking for modified records. And when we find them, we capture all of the properties that are relevant about the record. When was it created? What's the file name? What's the size? If it's in a folder, what's the name of the folder it's in? When was it last modified? This one happens to be in Microsoft 365. So is there a retention label assigned? We know the SharePoint Online connector is the one that indexed it. So now we can begin to get SharePoint specific properties. Is it checked out? Does it have a content type? What's the name of the SharePoint library it's located in? What's the name of the site collection? Where's the location of that record? And let me break that location down into individual levels. And now, because it does have a content type, what are the metadata values assigned to all of the columns on that content type? This all becomes the information that Gimmal uses to drive classification, to drive retention, even to drive adding records to legal holds. And so what happens over time, as I'm crawling, as I'm indexing, as I'm classifying my records, as a records manager, I begin to build up this single view of all of my records across the enterprise. From one screen, my managed screen, I've got just under 1,000 records. It's a demo environment. But I can quickly see, here are records in SharePoint. This record happens to have been declared because you can see the little lock visual here. This record's in SharePoint Online. This record's in SharePoint. It's not only been declared, it's also been added to a legal hold. Here's a bunch of records on a file system. If I go to the second page, here's some physical records, right? I have one view of all of my records in a single location. And again, at any point in time, if I want to see more information about that record, I simply click the 3 dots, I bring up the record details screen, and now I see this one's declared, it's on a legal hold. Here's the legal hold that it's on. Here's the life cycle. It's been moved into phase 2 of the life cycle, and notice that our life cycles can have one or more phases. So you can create very simple or more complex retention life cycles to meet your business need for different types of records, for different business scenarios. And you can see the expiration date has now been calculated on this record, September 4th of 2025. So come back in 5 years and we'll wrap up the demo. Now, this is all set up and managed and configured through my file plan. My file plan is where I, as a records manager, can come in and set up one or more file plans. We'll take a look at the big bucket schedule here. I can create any type of a structure that I need, right? So some systems, well, Microsoft 365, for example, kind of gives you a flat file plan. we can create a hierarchy of record classes and record categories. I can have my big bucket schedule. I can have my accounting category with all of my accounting record classes. I can have some record classes that are administrative. I can have some record classes, you see the little open folder here, that are case-based. Right? So I can create whatever structure I need to manage whatever business case that I have out there. Here's my administrative records. Here's my departmental administration. Here are record cases based on the individual departments. For each one of these locations, I have properties that control how the records are managed. It's case-based. It has a life cycle. It has classification rules. Here's the life cycle that is associated with this record class. Record declarations possible, and it's never going to contain vital records in this particular record class. Right? So I can build this out if we need to. I can come in and create whatever type of retention triggers that I need. So my retention triggers can be very simple, date-based, created date, modified date, contract end date, employee termination date. They can be rule-based. Is the case marked as closed? Yes or no. If it is, trigger retention. Or we can do event-based, which is a pretty common scenario. Shana wins the lottery over the weekend, shows up on Monday, says, I'm retiring, I'm out of here. Now we're going to terminate Shana. We don't know when she'll win the lottery, but when she does, we need to create an employee termination event. Or I have an asset requirement, or asset retirement, excuse me. We have a facility, or we have a piece of equipment, or I had one client that leased aircraft, right? When a specific aircraft was retired, they wanted to trigger retention on all the records related to that aircraft. Those are event-based retentions, right? So those can all be combined into your life cycles and to manage the retention. And then probably the last thing I'll touch on here before we move into the Q&A is the physical record aspect. Physical records need to be managed the same way as your electronic records, and too many systems treat physical records completely separate. They have their own retention schedule, they're viewed separately, they're managed differently. We include the physical records, as you saw, right alongside the electronic, and we give you a way to come in and set up a structure for how are your physical records going to be organized. Maybe I want to emulate my actual warehouses or file rooms where the records are at, so that I can come in and say, well, you know what, in my Orange County warehouse on aisle 1, shelf 1.1, here are all of my physical records, right? Here are all the boxes currently sitting on that shelf. I can see which ones are charged out, which ones are charged in, which ones have been marked as not requestable. They can't be charged out. And then for any of the records, again, if I want to see the record details, well, my physical record is managed no differently than my electronic record. And my physical records have properties, just like my electronic record, right? So when I create physical records, I'm still giving them a name, a title, subjects. We know the location you stored it in. If it's been charged out, we know who it's charged out to. If you want to create barcode values, we can generate barcode values or let you key in or scan barcode values, right? But physical records become one more record type along the way. And then ultimately, when records reach a point for disposition, I have a single view in my record inbox where I can come in now and see all of the records awaiting an action, whether that action is disposition, approve a transfer, mark permanent, for both my physical records and my electronic records. And if you're collecting and managing records and cases, well, guess what? I can approve disposition of an entire case of records. This one only has 4, could have 40, could have 400, but I can approve the entire case with a single mouse click. So that's kind of a brief overview of Gimmal Records Management. There's obviously a lot more, and we can't go through everything in a 30-minute webinar. So I'm going to come back into the slide deck now and wrap it, and we'll go to questions. So points to ponder. What kind of things keep you up at night as a records manager, as a compliance officer? Well, first, has your company standardized on a content services platform? You may have deployed Microsoft 365, and that may be your platform for the future, right? That's your cloud platform, and that's where everything is going, and that's where you want everything to be put. And that's great. Everything is probably not there yet, and it may never be, right? There may be certain legacy systems that are ingrained in very critical business processes that can't just be turned off, right? Second, do you have legacy ECMs, right? Those are good examples in certain industries like life sciences, financial services, and others. Some of those legacy systems are locked into critical business processes and can't just be ripped and replaced, right? So they're going to be there a while, and they have records in them that need to be managed. Do you have a cloud strategy, right? Are you moving everything to the cloud? A lot of companies during the list of products Shane had talked about Gimmal migration. A lot of companies are migrating off legacy systems. They're looking to cut cost and move to the cloud. And so if your company does have a cloud strategy, one, getting content migrated in, and then two, getting policy put around it becomes critical, and having the equivalent level of records management capability in the cloud that you may be used to on-prem is important. And that's what Gimmal brings and adds to Microsoft 365. What are you going to do with your physical records, right? Especially if you're moving to the cloud, right? Gimmal gives you that ability to manage physical records right alongside your electronic records. And file shares are usually the other problem child. How much content do you have out there on file shares? Do you know what's out on your file shares? Do you need to do file analytics first with something like Gimmal Altitude to figure out what's out there before you even begin a lift and shift strategy to the cloud? And you know what? Migrating content costs money. And there may be low value content. You just decide you want to leave it on the file shares for now and let it live out its retention. There's no point in spending money to move it into the cloud and eat up your storage space if it's legacy information that needs to be kept for compliance purposes for another 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. It can just sit on the file shares but still have retention, still be locked down if you need it to, whatever you need. So our last poll question, and we're going to go to the Q&A here as well, is if you'd like to see a deeper dive demonstration of Gimmal Records Management, just click yes. If not at this time, click not at this time, and we'll be following up with you in the future. But we can certainly get into a deeper dive into more of the features, talk a lot more about how the record classification and things happen in a personalized demo. So with that, Shana, while we wait for the poll here to clear out, I'm going to go ahead and let you start processing the questions.
Yeah, thanks. And just as a reminder, the Q&A section on your screen is available if you have any additional questions. So the first one we have, Dean, is what happens when you add a record to a legal hold? Is it copied? Is a link created? Or is that configurable?
Yeah, so when Gimmal adds a record to a legal hold, because we're managing the records in place, again, we're not copying it, we're not moving it. The record stays exactly where it's at. We will put it in essentially in a declared state where we will trigger the locking on the record so that it can't be modified or it can't be deleted while it's on legal hold. You may be familiar with a kind of a preservation copy approach. We're not taking that approach today. We're just simply locking it down and saying, while it's on hold, you can't delete it, you can't modify it.
Great. The next one we have is, does this solution log changes to life cycles or record classes?
Yeah. So, if I have a record class that has, let's say it has a 5-year retention on it, and next year comes along and the regulatory body says, nope, this type of record now has to have a 7-year retention. Well, through the file plan screen and through the lifecycle configuration, I can make one change, changing the retention period from 5 years to 7 years. When I save that lifecycle, any record class that uses that lifecycle will now go through and automatically recalculate the expiration date of all the records under that lifecycle. So as a records manager, I don't have to touch anything in the repository. The recalculation of the expiration date becomes an automatic step.
Great. And I'm going to ask just one more. I want to be respectful of time. We're 1 minute over. Can custom reports be created?
Yes. So we didn't show the reporting today. Gimmal provides 23 reports out of the box with the system. Things like file plan or classification or records approaching expiration, by record class. But we know we'll never create every report that every client might want. So there is the ability to create custom reports that can pull any records information out of the database that you need.
Great. Well, I'll go ahead and wrap it up there. If anyone has any more questions, Dean, if you want to switch to the next slide. Our contact information was up on the screen, our personal email addresses. You could also email us at info@gimmal.com, excuse me, or visit our website, www.gimmal.com. For those interested in the recording of today's webinar, we're going to send it out via thank you email between 24 to 48 hours. Everybody enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate your time.